The Duke ruled Liverpool's streets with an iron fist, but it was Emma's quiet courage and a betrayed lieutenant's secret that finally cracked his empire wide open. Behind the city's iconic skyline, their lives collided in a deadly game of power, fear, and survival, setting off a chain of events that would shake Liverpool to its core. Liverpool's story was never just about music, football, or the bustling docks. It was also about secrets lurking beneath the surface. In the early 2000s, the city was changing. Behind the iconic waterfront and busy streets, a new force was quietly taking hold. A powerful drug empire. It started small, almost invisible to most people. But as the years passed, this underground network grew into something vast and dangerous, controlling much of Liverpool's illicit drug trade. At the heart of this rise was a mysterious man known only as the Duke. No one knew his real name, and very few had ever seen him. What made the Duke different was his ability to organize people, money, and resources in ways that others couldn't. While many gangs fought openly on the streets, the Duke operated from the shadows, pulling strings without ever getting his hands dirty. His influence spread quickly, and before long, the empire he built controlled drug distribution across neighborhoods and beyond. The group's beginnings were humble. It started with small-time dealers selling heroin and cocaine in the poorer districts of the city. But the Duke's vision was bigger. Instead of fighting rival gangs, he sought to absorb them or push them out quietly. Using a mix of intimidation and clever business tactics, he created a structure that resembled a legitimate company more than a street gang. There were clear roles for every member: couriers, enforcers, money launderers, and lookouts. This level of organization allowed them to expand rapidly while avoiding the chaos that often weakens other criminal groups. What made this empire even more dangerous was its ability to stay under the radar. The Duke was careful, making sure no one in his inner circle attracted too much attention. Police forces in Liverpool were already stretched thin, battling a rising tide of crime. Corruption and fear meant that many who might have spoken out remained silent. The city's underbelly became a place where loyalty was bought with money and enforced with violence. As the drug empire grew, its impact on Liverpool's communities became impossible to ignore. Families were torn apart by addiction, violence spilled onto the streets, and the city's once proud reputation was overshadowed by fear. Yet for many, the Duke remained a ghost, an unseen king who controlled everything from behind the scenes, setting the stage for a battle that would shake Liverpool to its core. The Duke's empire was far more than just a drug operation. It was a carefully crafted machine that reached into almost every corner of Liverpool. As the network grew, so did its influence. The gang didn't only deal in drugs, they controlled nightclubs where deals were made, businesses that helped launder money, and even had connections with local officials. This web of influence was the secret to their power. It allowed them to operate with near impunity, as they had people watching their backs in places no one would expect. One of the most surprising parts of the empire was how it blended into everyday life. Some of Liverpool's popular night spots were fronts for the gang's activities. These clubs weren't just places for music and dancing, they were hubs for planning, trading, and recruiting new members. The Duke's organization used these venues to keep tabs on rivals and ensure loyalty within their ranks. With money flowing from drugs into legitimate businesses, it became harder for outsiders to tell where the legal world ended and the criminal one began. The gang's reach didn't stop there. Rumors circulated about officials who were either too scared or too willing to accept bribes. Some police officers, local politicians, and even community leaders were whispered to have ties to the empire, either turning a blind eye or actively helping the gang. This made any attempt to fight the organization extremely difficult. Even when evidence was found, cases often fell apart because witnesses were too afraid to testify or were paid off to stay quiet. Fear was a key weapon for the Duke's empire. Stories spread quickly about those who crossed the gang. People who disappeared, were badly beaten, or faced threats against their families. This created an unspoken rule in Liverpool: stay loyal or stay silent. The gang's reputation for swift and ruthless punishment kept many from speaking out, and even those who opposed them often found themselves isolated. Behind the scenes, the Duke's network was constantly evolving, adapting to new threats and challenges. The leaders of the empire held regular meetings in secret locations to plan their next moves, shifting resources to stay ahead of law enforcement and rival groups. Their ability to stay one step ahead made the empire seem almost untouchable. For the people of Liverpool, this web of control was invisible but felt everywhere. The Duke's empire had created a shadow world beneath the city, where power, money, and fear ruled. It was a world few could escape, and one that threatened to swallow the city whole. As the Duke's empire tightened its grip on Liverpool, the city's streets began to change in ways many couldn't ignore. Once bustling with noisy rival gangs vying for territory, the neighborhoods gradually grew quieter, but the calm was deceptive. It wasn't peace, it was control. The Duke's gang had effectively pushed out or eliminated most competition, leaving little room for other criminal groups to operate. This new silence was the sound of domination, a sign that the empire ruled with an iron fist. Violence hadn't disappeared, but it had become more calculated and less public. Instead of chaotic street fights and open gun battles, the gang used fear as their main weapon. Threats and warnings were delivered quietly, often through trusted messengers or coded signals. When violence did happen, it was swift and brutal, a reminder that the gang was always watching and ready to act. This method kept the streets under control without drawing unnecessary attention from the public or law enforcement. The police force found itself in an impossible position. Liverpool's officers were already stretched thin, and the gang's fearful secrecy made it difficult to gather solid evidence. Without witnesses willing to come forward, cases rarely went anywhere. Corruption and intimidation further complicated matters. Some officers, either scared or tempted by bribes, looked the other way, allowing the empire to grow stronger. For many in the police force who wanted to fight back, the challenge was overwhelming. For the city's residents, life under the empire's rule was a mix of fear and resignation. Many people knew what was happening, but felt powerless to stop it. Speaking out meant risking retaliation, not just against themselves, but their families. Neighborhoods became places where trust was scarce, and silence was often the safest choice. This atmosphere made it easier for the gang to operate, as people stayed quiet and kept their distance. Behind closed doors, the Duke's gang continued to build their strength. They weren't just content with controlling Liverpool's streets. They were planning for something bigger. Their growing network extended into nearby cities, with connections forming that could one day stretch across the country. The gang's ability to move smoothly between different criminal activities made them more dangerous than ever before. Though Liverpool seemed calm on the surface, beneath it was a city trapped by fear and control. The Duke's empire was no longer just a local gang. It was a powerful force shaping the future of the entire region. And for those living in its shadow, the question wasn't if the empire would fall, it was when, and how much damage would be done before that day came. Amid the growing shadow of the drug empire, Emma lived a life far removed from the violence and danger that surrounded Liverpool's streets. She was young and hopeful, working as a courier to make ends meet, unaware that her simple deliveries connected her to the heart of a criminal network. Emma's job seemed ordinary, just transporting packages from one place to another without asking questions. But what she didn't realize was that these packages carried much more than goods. They were pieces of a dangerous puzzle that held the city's darkest secrets. At first, Emma's deliveries were small and routine. She would pick up parcels from obscure addresses and drop them off without delay, careful not to attract attention. It was a quiet existence, and she rarely thought about who might be behind the packages or what they contained. But then, one day, a shipment arrived that was different from all the others. It was larger, heavily guarded, and destined for an unknown buyer outside the city. This shipment wasn't just another drug deal, it was a signal that the empire was expanding, reaching across borders and building new alliances. Emma's discovery put her in a dangerous position. She understood that what she had stumbled upon could change everything, exposing the inner workings of the Duke's operation. Yet fear gripped her. The Empire was ruthless, known for punishing anyone who threatened their secrecy. Emma faced a terrifying choice: stay silent and protect herself, or risk her safety by coming forward with what she knew. The weight of this decision bore down on her. For days, she wrestled with her conscience, knowing that revealing the truth might save lives but could also put her in the gang's crosshairs. Emma's world became a careful balancing act, trying to keep her involvement hidden, while gathering enough information to make a difference. Every delivery now felt like a step deeper into a dangerous game she never wanted to play. Unbeknownst to Emma, law enforcement had begun to notice unusual activity around the shipments she handled. Her role, though unintentional, was becoming a vital link in a growing investigation. The stakes were rising, and the walls around the Empire were starting to close in. Emma's story was about to intertwine with a larger battle, a battle that would test courage, trust, and the limits of survival. In the shadows of Liverpool's streets, Emma became a silent witness to the Empire's expansion, a key to unlocking its secrets. Her journey marked the first cracks in a seemingly untouchable network, setting the stage for the events that would shake the city to its core. The true identity of the Duke was one of Liverpool's best-kept secrets. For years, rumors swirled about who he might be, but no one could say for certain. Unlike the reckless gang leaders often seen on the news, the Duke lived a double life that baffled many. By day, he was believed to be a respected figure in the community, a businessman who mingled with Liverpool's elite, attending social events and making public appearances. By night, however, he controlled one of the most dangerous criminal empires the city had ever seen. This double life allowed the Duke to stay hidden in plain sight. His carefully crafted public image was a shield, protecting him from suspicion and giving him access to powerful people. Those who crossed paths with him in social circles had no idea they were dealing with a man whose decisions sent shockwaves through Liverpool's underground. This contrast between the respectable businessman and ruthless criminal made him almost untouchable. Investigators struggled to piece together clues that linked the businessman to the drug empire. Every lead seemed to vanish just as they got close. His wealth, connections, and influence made it difficult for law enforcement to build a strong case. Many of his activities were masked behind layers of shell companies and trusted associates who acted as buffers between him and the illegal operations. This complex network created a wall of secrecy that few could penetrate. The Duke's ability to maintain this double life also had a psychological effect on those around him. Friends and family members spoke of a man who was charming and generous, someone who cared for his community. These qualities made the revelations about his criminal side even more shocking. It showed how deeply the Empire had infiltrated not just the streets, but the very fabric of Liverpool's society. As the investigation continued, law enforcement realized that exposing the Duke would require more than just evidence. It would demand patience and precision. Any wrong move could tip him off or destroy the fragile trust of those willing to cooperate. The stakes were high, and the pressure mounted on everyone involved. The duality of the Duke's life was a stark reminder of how appearances could deceive. Behind the polished suits and smiling public face was a man who ruled Liverpool's drug trade with an iron fist. This secret identity kept the city's drug empire alive longer than anyone expected, and unraveling it would become one of the most challenging battles. Liverpool went to the edge. The city's drug empire, long thought untouchable, finally showed signs of vulnerability. An anonymous tip, delivered in secret, sparked a chain reaction that would change everything. The tip contained detailed information about the locations of key drug shipments and the identities of several high-ranking members of the Duke's network. For the first time, police had a real chance to strike back. Coordinated raids were planned carefully, with officers working around the clock to prepare. Multiple locations across Liverpool were targeted simultaneously: warehouses, nightclubs, safe houses, and even some businesses suspected of laundering money. The goal was to disrupt the Empire's operations and gather as much evidence as possible. The raids were swift and precise, catching many gang members off guard. For the residents watching from a distance, it felt like a turning point, a a long-awaited fight against the shadowy forces that had controlled their city for years. Despite the success of the initial raids, the Duke remained elusive. He had managed to avoid capture time and time again, slipping through cracks in the system. His ability to disappear when the heat was on added to his almost mythic status. Police knew that without the Duke, the Empire's power would weaken, but catching him proved to be a challenge unlike any other. He had prepared for moments like this, using safe routes, trusted allies and advanced communication methods to stay one step ahead. As the investigations deepened, new challenges emerged. The gang's infrastructure was vast and complex, and even with arrests made, many suspects refused to talk. Witness intimidation and a culture of silence within affected communities hindered efforts to gather critical testimony. Corruption within certain parts of the police force and local government also slowed progress, reminding everyone just how deeply the Empire had infiltrated Liverpool. Still, the pressure was mounting. The raids sent a clear message: the Empire was not invincible. The balance of power had begun to shift, and cracks appeared in the once solid foundation of the Duke's reign. For the people of Liverpool, hope was rekindled, but uncertainty remained. The Empire was still out there, hidden in the shadows, waiting for its next move. The battle between law enforcement and the Duke's drug empire was far from over, but the crackdown marked the beginning of a new chapter, one filled with tension, risk, and the promise of justice. The empire that the Duke had built began to show signs of weakening, but it was not outside forces that delivered the greatest blow. It was betrayal from within. One of the gang's most trusted lieutenants, a man who had been with the Duke since the early days, grew tired of the endless violence and secrecy. Disillusioned and scared by the lives lost and the destruction caused, he made a choice that would send shockwaves through the entire organization. This betrayal was unexpected and devastating. The lieutenant began secretly cooperating with law enforcement, providing critical information that had long been impossible to obtain. His inside knowledge exposed key players, drug routes, hidden stash houses, and even details about the Duke's operations. What was once a near impenetrable fortress of crime started to crumble under the weight of these revelations. The fallout from this betrayal was swift and brutal. Word spread through the gang that someone close had turned against them, igniting a wave of paranoia and mistrust. The Duke's inner circle fractured as suspicions grew, and loyalty became a rare commodity. Members who were once confident and united now looked over their shoulders, unsure who could be trusted. This internal chaos made it easier for law enforcement to strike, as the gang no longer moved as one. Violence erupted within the empire as the Duke sought to root out the traitor and reassert his control. Punishments became harsher and more public, intended to send a message to anyone thinking of betrayal. But the damage was done. The fear that had once kept people silent turned into fear of each other, breaking the gang's code of silence and making it vulnerable in ways it never had been before. The lieutenant's betrayal didn't just weaken the gang, it sparked a shift in the power dynamics across Liverpool's criminal underworld. Rivals who had been waiting for an opportunity moved in to claim territory, leading to new conflicts and instability. The empire's once solid foundation was cracking, and the city felt the tremors of change. For the Duke, this internal betrayal was a turning point. The empire he had built with careful planning was unraveling from the inside, and his grip on power was slipping. What remained was a dangerous, unstable network struggling to survive amid suspicion and violence. The war for control of Liverpool's streets had become even more deadly and unpredictable. With the empire cracking from within and law enforcement closing in, the Duke knew time was running out. Desperate to regain control and silence the growing threats, he devised a bold and risky plan, a final gambit that could either restore his power or bring everything crashing down. This plan centered around a massive drug shipment, one so large and valuable it could secure his empire's future for years to come. It was a high-stakes move, betting everything on a single moment. The shipment was unlike anything Liverpool had seen before, involving millions of pounds worth of heroin and cocaine sourced from international upplier. The Duke's network had spent months preparing for it, coordinating across borders and securing secret routes to avoid detection. The operation required flawless timing and complete secrecy, as any mistake could expose the entire empire to destruction. As the shipment made its way toward Liverpool's docks, law enforcement had already caught wind of the plan through informants and surveillance. They scrambled to organize an ambush, calling in support from specialized units and coordinating with border control to trap the shipment before it could enter the city. The stakes were high. Failure meant the empire would survive and possibly grow stronger. Success would deal a crushing blow to the Duke's reign. The city held its breath. As the day of the operation arrived, tensions ran high, with officers waiting in hidden positions, ready to strike the moment the shipment arrived. Meanwhile, the Duke's men were on edge, knowing the risks but determined to pull off the deal that could secure their future. Every movement was watched, every decision critical. When the shipment finally reached the docks, chaos erupted. Law enforcement moved in swiftly, surrounding the area and arresting key members of the operation. But the Duke was nowhere to be found. Despite the police's best efforts, he had once again vanished before the ambush. The shipment was seized, but the elusive leader remained free. Though the ambush disrupted the empire's plans, it marked the beginning of the end. The Duke's network was weakened, finances damaged, and trust among his followers shaken. The city saw that even the most powerful criminal could be cornered, and the police gained valuable ground in their fight. The final gambit had failed for the Duke, but it had set the stage for his ultimate downfall, as the empire he built teetered on the edge of collapse. The long hunt for the Duke reached its climax on the docks of the Mersey River, where the city's criminal empire had once thrived. After months of careful investigation, surveillance and relentless pressure from law enforcement, the elusive leader was finally caught in a dramatic showdown that brought Liverpool's drug trade crashing down. The arrest sent shockwaves through the city, signaling the end of an era marked by fear and control. The operation that led to the Duke's capture was the result of years of work by multiple agencies determined to bring justice to a city that had suffered under his rule. Officers moved in at dawn, surrounding the docks where the Duke was believed to be meeting with his closest associates. The moment the police closed in, there was no escape. The Duke, once so skilled at disappearing, was taken into custody without violence. His capture was a testament to the patience and determination of those who had refused to let the empire continue unchecked. With the Duke behind bars, the entire structure of the drug empire began to collapse. Many high-ranking members were arrested in the weeks that followed, their roles and connections exposed in court. Trials revealed the full scope of the operation, from international drug shipments to local street sales and money laundering schemes. The city watched as the web of crime unraveled, piece by piece, exposing how deeply the empire had infiltrated Liverpool's institutions. The Duke's trial became one of the most closely followed criminal cases in the city's history. Evidence presented showed not only his involvement in drug trafficking, but also the corruption and intimidation tactics that had kept the empire alive for so long. Witnesses who had once been too afraid to speak began to come forward, encouraged by the fall of the gang's leader. Their testimonies helped paint a clearer picture of the fear and control that had gripped the city for years. Despite the overwhelming evidence, the trial also revealed the complexity of dismantling such a powerful organization. Some members received lighter sentences by cooperating, while others remained defiant. The legal battles dragged on, but the message was clear. Liverpool would no longer tolerate the grip of the Duke's empire. The fall of the Duke was not just a victory for law enforcement, it was a turning point for Liverpool itself. The city began to heal from the wounds left by years of violence and corruption, but the memory of the empire remained a reminder of how fragile peace could be. The shadow of the Duke lingered, a stark warning that power could corrupt even the brightest cities. With the Duke behind bars and his empire dismantled, Liverpool faced a new challenge: rebuilding a city scarred by years of drug violence and corruption. The fall of the empire opened the door for change, but healing wouldn't come easily. Communities that had been torn apart by addiction, fear, and poverty now had to find ways to move forward. For many, the scars ran deep, and trust was slow to return. Efforts to clean up the city involved more than just law enforcement. Local leaders, charities, and social workers stepped in to support those affected by the drug trade. Rehabilitation programs for addicts expanded, and outreach initiatives aimed to provide alternatives to the cycle of crime and despair. The goal was to create safer neighborhoods and give people a chance to rebuild their lives without the shadow of the Duke's empire hanging over them. But the road to recovery was complicated. While the Duke's network had been broken, the demand for drugs didn't disappear overnight. Smaller gangs tried to fill the vacuum, leading to bursts of violence and turf wars. Police remained vigilant, knowing that without ongoing support and community cooperation, the city could easily slide back into chaos. The fight against drugs and crime became a long-term battle, requiring patience and commitment. The Duke's trial and conviction served as a warning to others who might try to follow in his footsteps. His story was told repeatedly in the media, a grim reminder of how power, greed, and fear had nearly destroyed Liverpool. Yet, it also became a symbol of hope that even the darkest empires could fall when enough people stood together. For the people of Liverpool, life gradually began to change. Streets that had once been dangerous grew quieter, and new community projects brought people together. The docks, once the heart of the empire, started to transform into spaces of growth and opportunity. But beneath the surface, memories of those years lingered, lessons etched into the city's history. The Duke's empire was a chapter in Liverpool's story that exposed vulnerabilities but also revealed strength. It showed how a city could be tested by darkness and still find a way to fight back. While the scars would remain, so would the determination to build a future where such an empire could never rise again. Liverpool was no longer just a city under the shadow of crime, it was a city ready to reclaim its soul.